right about now. Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Right up now, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Now.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Right About Now podcast. This is John Small. We've got a really amazing episode for you today. Jean Twenge is going to join us. And Jean is a professor of psychology at San Diego State University and the author of a new book called 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World. And she is tackling an issue that I think is very near and dear to most parents' hearts and minds, and that is, what the hell are we supposed to do with our kids' interaction with their phones? And, you know, children are now getting their phones as early as 10, 11 years old. I think we gave our kids their phones when they were about 11 years old. Mistake, because that technology was never designed for children. It's, as we know, quite addictive and destructive in so many ways. It interferes with their sleep. It hurts their self-confidence. It destroys their friendships, their sense of independence, their mental health in general. And it really is an epidemic around the world right now. And I just watched this documentary on Netflix that I really recommend you see. It's called Unknown Caller. And it's about this 13-year-old named Lauren and her boyfriend who become relentlessly harassed by an anonymous unknown number for like over a year in this small Michigan town. And the texts are incredibly X-rated and aggressive and explicit, and nobody knows who's sending them, but they are definitely being sent by somebody who knows the two kids really well, and it's quite a mystery. And when you find out who's actually sending the text, it's quite a shocker. So I really recommend that. But the whole time I'm watching this, I'm thinking, why are the parents allowing their kids to have phones when this is the result? I mean, it's causing the kids to be suicidal in this case. And I'm not going to give too much away, but it's horrible. And so Jean has answers, and she's really qualified to have answers. She is one of the country's leading experts on generational change. And you know how much I'm into generational stuff lately with all my Gen X writing on Substack. And Jean was actually one of my favorite guests. Her previous book, Generations, has taught me so much about how all the different generations are different from each other and the same from each other. And, you know, this generation coming up is having its own struggles, Generation Z and Generation Alpha. And so much of it is precipitated by the phone and by the computer and by social media. And you don't need me to tell you this. I mean, it's obvious if you have a kid what's going on. So the good news is that Jean gives parents some really useful suggestions for helping their children deal with this problem. And she joins me. So without further ado, I bring you Jean Twenge. Jean Twenge, welcome to the Right About Now podcast.
Thanks so much.
So happy to have you back on the show. I loved our last conversation about your book Generations, but we're going to talk about your new book today. And it's definitely a departure for you. And I'm curious why you chose to write this. If you could give us a little background of the origin story of why you decided to write this book.
Yeah. So, you know, I have been researching kids and teens and technology use for a long time, about a decade now. My book, iGen, was among the first to make the argument that the increase in teen depression was due to smartphones and social media. And of course, the premise at the core of my last book, Generations, was that technology has the biggest impact in creating cultural change and generational differences. But, you know, really this book comes from the collision of the research that I've been doing for a while on kids and smartphones and social media and mental health, and raising 3 teenagers myself and trying to keep them safe online and make sure that they're not on their phones 24/7, and just trying to figure out how to make that happen. And there's, you know, last few years, there's been a lot more consensus building on the best ways to do those things. And so it seemed like the right time.
Yeah, there's definitely been by necessity been a strong interest in this. I know Jonathan Haidt wrote a book that was quite influential on this topic. And, I'm also the parent of teenagers. Mine are 19 and 16. I kind of wish I had read this book 3 years ago or this book was out 3 years ago because I'm concerned, I'm always concerned about their use of the phone. The 19-year-old I've kind of lost track of because he's in university, but I still got my 16-year-old living at home. How old are your kids, out of curiosity?
18, 15, and 13.
Right. So you're right in the sweet spot. So all this research you're doing, what is the problem that you see it right now? What is the problem when it comes to teenagers or kids in general and their phones?
Well, there's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a long list.
Right.
So, I mean, we can start with, younger kids and teens, that it's become really common for kids to get their first phone at 10 or 11, which is very, very young. And smartphones were not designed for kids that young. And once they get that phone, it's often in their hand all the time, and it interferes with everything else in their lives. So that's usually not what we want as parents. We want our kids to have a childhood. We want our teens to have an adolescence where they're hanging out with friends in person and learning independence and not just in their bedroom staring at a device all the time. So that's, one of the reasons that I wrote this book, was to try to help parents try to prevent that from happening, because it is happening way too much.
And it's in their phone in their hands all the time and in front of their faces all the time because it's addictive, right? In some ways. I mean, it is, people are addicted to, I'm addicted to my phone. I'm a adult, who has executive functioning, powers, but to hand it to a child, it's like giving them nonstop candy or something, it's just, right? I mean, what's happening to their brains when they're looking at that phone?
Yeah, and we still don't know. And I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm a little reluctant to go into that too much in detail. But there certainly have been studies suggesting that kids who are heavy users of electronic devices and social media, that there are differences in their brains.
But you are a studier, wonderful researcher on generations, and you've looked at different generations and how they've interacted with technology. Do you see parallels, for example, between what's happening with kids today and phones and what might have happened to kids, the advent of the first TV set, where all of a sudden, I remember people complain. Well, I'm not that old, but I do remember, I sort of recall hearing people say, they watch too much TV, certainly in Gen X,
For sure.
Or, the invention of Atari, and all of a sudden we were playing Pong and, so do you see a similarity? Is it worse now? How would you draw parallels?
Well, 2 points that I'll make about the analogy with television. So one is, this is definitely different. The phone goes everywhere. There are very sophisticated algorithms, especially in gaming now and in social media, that are designed to make sure you use the app as often as possible and come back to it as many times as possible, because that's how the companies make the most money. They call it engagement, which makes it sound so awesome, but other people would say it's addiction. So TV doesn't have that. Yes, it tries to be engaging in its own way, but it does not have these AI-powered algorithms that are keeping people on to the extent that social media does. And that phone can go everywhere with you. Your TV set can't, or at least couldn't, back in the day when people were complaining about Gen Xers watching too much TV. So the other thing I always wanted to acknowledge about TV is that it's not that TV was completely harmless. It wasn't. People say, we watch a ton of TV and we turned out okay. Well, sure, but look at the state of national politics. Look at how people are not joining community groups like they used to. So one of my favorite books is Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone. Came out in 2000, and he documented in like 800 pages how people are not getting together with their neighbors as much anymore, how they're not joining community associations anymore. At the end of that 200 pages, his conclusion about what caused that was television.
Interesting. And that was before, that was written in 2000, so he wouldn't even know that social media would come around and make us even more siloed and lonely and alone. And of course, I think we've all had the experience of like going up and, our kids have a play date or something and going, and watching them, and they're all on their phones. Like they're sitting with each other, but they're all looking at their phones. very hard to understand that and not to be like, you guys get off your phone. I mean, of course, we're going to talk about this. We have to say get off your phones, but it really is the way that they interact with each other now. It's like phone and being together, but having the phones in front of their faces.
But it doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. And what I think is really interesting is when I talk to middle school students and high school students, so I give talks for that group and their parents, is they know that this is a problem. They don't actually want to be staring at their phones all the time. A lot of them, like say, for example, if their school allows them to have their phones out at lunch, they will be on their phone, but sometimes they're doing that because all of their friends are on their phone. And they actually hate it. So there was one 10th grader who came up to me after a talk I gave and said, I really want to talk to my friends at lunch, but I can't because they're on their phones. What should I do? And my heart broke a little bit because what can he do? Right? It's a group problem, not just an individual one.
This episode of Right About Now is brought to you by AG1. And this is not a plug here. I actually use and love this product. I've partnered with AG1 because they make a very high quality product that I genuinely look forward to drinking every single day. And as I get older, it's really important to me that I get the supplements that I need and that they're high quality and make me feel good and give me some energy. And AG1 is there for me. It's the perfect, very low stress, low maintenance way for me to get the green I need. So if you want to start using AG1, I have got a special discount code for you. You try AG1 and you get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 and K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs that you can take with you wherever you go. What you have to do is you go to drinkag1.com/rightaboutnow. That's drinkag1/rightaboutnow and get those freebies. I think people underrate the amount the kids would like to be told not to be on their phones. I really found that to be my experience with my kids. And, you know, my daughter went to she went to a 6-week summer camp this summer that was a no phones. They absolutely were not allowed to bring their phones. So she, for 6 weeks, was offline, which was unbelievable experience for her. And when we went to visit her about 3 weeks in for Parents' Day, you know, she was kind of like curious, but she said, I don't know if I don't really want to look at my phone. Don't show me my phone. Like she was battling this because I think she just loved, by the way, she had the best summer of her life. I think because she was away from the phone.
I love camp. Camp is something I talk about in the book about. It really is. It's amazing.
I wish I could go to camp now. Or I wish I could go to detox camp because we're talking about kids here and some of this stuff would be good for parents too. But anyway, but yeah, so to me, it just reaffirmed that it is so important for them to be away from their phone and that they like it and that she didn't really want to be plugged back in. So anyway, I think it's so important. Do you think parents are somewhat at fault here too? Because of course we give them their phones too young, but we also I'm amazed that more parents don't fight for banning phones in school. I mean, and we're going to talk about that a little later, but because that's one of your rules. But does that surprise you? That surprises me. Like the parents actually argue that they want to have kids to have their phone in school.
So from the surveys I've seen and the principals I've talked to, most parents are on board with no phones during the school day, bell to bell. But there is a small but vocal group who are not. And yeah, they will push back. They will say, but I should be able to contact my child at any moment, which you can say to them because most of them are Gen Xers. How would you have liked it if your parents would have been able to contact you at any moment during the school day? You probably would have hated it. And then the thing that some parents will bring up is what about emergencies, particularly what about a school shooting, which is a valid concern to have. But school safety experts are virtually unanimous that it's actually safer for kids not to have their phones in that situation because it can alert the shooter to where people are hiding. It can distract students when they need to be listening to instructions. And if they are contacting their parents or other people, it ties up bandwidth that's needed by first responders. And then parents may rush to the school and then the first responders can't get through.
Wow. So, I mean, it's kind of amazing to me because, of course, most parents today remember a time when you couldn't communicate with your kid through their cell phone at school, and we were all just fine. I mean, of course, I'm old enough to know that way before cell phones, like I think the only way you would ever be able to get in touch with your kid at school would be to call the office. So,
And you
and
can
that
still
worked.
do that. That's the thing. You can still do that.
Still
Even
do-
individual classrooms, almost all of them still have a landline. So,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, I'm 100% on board of them. And of course, my daughter's school does not allow phones during the day. And I think it's fantastic. So let's talk about, before we get into the rules, I want to talk about that. There's one question that I had asked in terms of putting it in generational context. You said it's some ways it's worse than the TV because you can take it with you. And I'm curious, has there ever been a time, I guess every generation is introduced, some new technology is introduced or some new invention is introduced. But has there ever been a time that seems this dire, like for a younger generation? I just can't, of course, kids faced war. I mean, there's things that we faced in our lives and over the years, but it just seems like right now it's one of the worst things that kids have ever had to put up with.
Well, to take the broad view of the historical context, which I do think is important, the early 90s was pretty bad. The height of the violent crime wave. And it was Gen X who was bearing the brunt of that because that's
right.
Mostly, teens and young adults. So that was a pretty bad time. The economy was also pretty bad. So, and you can see that if you go back and look at when the media first discovered Gen X, it was very much this pessimistic, kind of negative, cynical, view of the generation. I think that was a product of the early 90s. And then, of course, by the time you get to the mid 90s, late 90s, the economy starts to improve. You get the tech boom, you get violent crime going down, and things started to get a lot better. I think what's remarkable about our time now, crime rate is actually still pretty low. The economy is doing pretty well.
Amazing.
From most indicators that we have, child abuse is down. Just a lot of indicators for children and teens are significantly better than they used to be. Fewer teens are drinking alcohol. Fewer are doing drugs. So marijuana use is pretty stable actually at least among teens. It's gone up among young adults. Fewer teens are having sex. The teen pregnancy rate has plummeted. So there's so many things that are going right for teens. Yet their suicide rate is almost as high as it was in the early 90s. Rates of depression are very, very high. And so there's like a crisis of our own making. It's not things like the violent crime rate where that's really hard to solve without massive amounts of policing and money and all kinds of other solutions. This is something that is, relatively speaking, easier to solve. But we haven't solved it. And so our kids are still really depressed because they are not seeing their friends in person. They're not sleeping as much as they should, partially because of that device. And they're in their bedrooms alone on the device.
Yeah. It seems like obvious how we have to, that we have to deal with this problem, yet it's been very complicated and harder than you would expect. And but you've laid out these rules that you give to parents to at least, help their children navigate this, because kids need help, right? Like they can't be expected to know how to do this on their own. That's the thing. I think we just sort of expect, don't look at your phone, whatever. Like, can you, it's more than that. Like we have to set ground rules and like you said, some of them, they want the rules sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really one of the reasons I wrote the book, was that so much of the advice out there for parents is like really vague and squishy. When should you give your kid a phone? Oh, it depends. Every family's different. Every kid is different. It's really unhelpful. Like, let's do like we did for driving and legal voting age and drinking. Let's choose an age and stick with it. Right.
So the age that you have come up with is 16. In terms of, you argue kids shouldn't be on social media until they're at least 16 years old, which is the age that they can vote, correct? Or is that?
No, they voted 18.
Okay, I'm going to take that back. So why 16?
So some argue that the minimum age for social media should be 18. And I actually agree with that. It makes sense for a lot of reasons, because it's legal adulthood. And when you sign up for a social media account, you have to sign a legal contract signing away your data. So really, it should be 18. 16 is a compromise because there are some 16 and 17-year-olds who really want to get involved in the community or get involved in politics, and social media can sometimes be useful for that. So I think it is a compromised position to say 16. I think ideally it should probably be 18, but you can see the argument for 16. And it definitely shouldn't be 13, which is what the legal minimum is now, because what parent or developmental expert or educator ever said 13, middle school, right at the beginning of puberty, that's the perfect time to introduce social media? Like, no one would ever argue that.
Right.
There's so much maturity that happens between those ages of 13 and 16.
So is this, it makes sense to me. Do you think, I mean, again, you're not a policymaker. This is what you're telling parents to do. But I feel like maybe the government should mandate this, or in some ways.
That would be amazing. That
right?
would be wonderful.
We can't smoke or we can't drink. There's certain things that kids cannot do until they can't drive, until they're 16. That was what I was thinking of, the driving. But in the meantime, I guess parents can set those rules. Now, that is easier said than done, because if all of your friends are on social and you're not, that could be tricky. How do you advise parents to navigate that? Like the sort of the FOMO and the peer pressure of social media?
Yeah. Well, your kids have many other ways they can communicate with their friends.
Right.
They can text, they can call, they can FaceTime, they can see each other in person. It doesn't have to be algorithmic social media. And it's interesting because the apps that are the most popular with the youngest kids, like TikTok in particular, isn't even used to communicate with friends.
Right.
And the feed is individualized. So that argument doesn't even work for that platform. And then for others like Instagram and Snapchat, again, there's many, many other ways that you can communicate with your friends. It doesn't have to be social media. It's not an automatic recipe for social isolation by any means. I know that from my own kids and from lots of other families that I've talked to. It absolutely can work.
Have you tried this with your own kids?
I have.
That's awesome. I wish I had. You also recommend phones that don't have all the bells and whistles so that you can't even access the apps, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's because the social media apps don't verify age. Even if they did, the age they'd be verifying is 13, which is way too low. Parental permission isn't required. The content moderation on social media is almost non-existent these days. Even on the Instagram so-called teen accounts, there's a report recently showing even they still had lots of stuff that passed by the content moderation, lots of toxic stuff, eating disorder stuff. It was violence. It was just everywhere. So that's why I think it's best to keep your kids off of those platforms. And one of the ways to do that is to not give your kid a smartphone. Give them a phone designed for kids that does not have social media on it at all. And another thing we haven't even touched on is AI chatbots, like especially the AI companions and relationship bots with the AI boyfriends and girlfriends. Do you really want your kid on that and having their first romantic relationship with a chatbot?
Yeah.
That just affirms them all the time and is probably having, an adult sexy conversation with them, which is what many of those are designed to do. So those basic phones, fortunately, also have those on the banned app list, which I think is a big relief.
That is, we haven't talked about AI now. It's almost like a whole separate book that you need to write, because that's
I know, right?
Like, first we had social media, which we had to do, and now we've got this other thing coming down the pike, and it's already here. And it's unbelievable and how realistic the voices sound. If you actually talk to ChatGPT, I can't even believe how much it sounds like a person. It really is like that movie Her, that is terrifying. And thankfully, I don't think my kids engage with AI yet, but it certainly shouldn't. You also recommended no devices in the bedrooms overnight. And I've even heard this for grown-ups,
Absolutely.
And tell me what your research has shown you that makes you take that stance.
Yeah, it's actually other people's research, and it's super, super solid. There's just tons of research showing that if that phone is in the bedroom overnight, that it disrupts sleep, that people don't sleep as long or as well. And that's true even if it's off, even if they're not engaging with the device, if it's just there and available, it still disrupts sleep. And then a couple studies recently have also shown that being on a device right before you go to bed, like if you're in bed about to go to sleep and you're scrolling through a device, that's even worse for sleep, that really sets you up for not sleeping well. And that's so common. The undergraduates I teach, almost all of them tell me that the last thing they do before they go to bed is look through their phone. And that should not be what you're doing before you go to bed.
I mean, I think of when we were teenagers, like we were on our phones, talking to our friends right at night. Like even that was kind of probably not the best. Well, that was just bad because of not getting homework done. But are you suggesting, because like my daughter likes to kind of go into her room at night and talk to her friends, usually not actually on the phone, but like they do it in such a weird way where they sort of like they're doing FaceTime, but they're also like doing other stuff. I don't know. They're like, do you recommend even, or just when they actually go to bed?
About a half hour before sleep, it's best to shut down anything that's going to be too stimulating.
Okay.
Talking to a friend on the phone is awesome, but probably still a little too stimulating. And then the other thing is the device is there. And so if they're on FaceTime, then they're probably getting other notifications rolling in, and that's very, very stimulating. So going to bed is like going to sleep is like landing a plane. It takes about 30 minutes.
Yep.
You have to do things that are more relaxing to be able to fall asleep relatively quickly and get a solid night's sleep. So you can read a book. You can watch TV. Best if it's on a traditional TV. So it depends. People are different with this. Some people, it's best to read because TV is too stimulating. Other people, reading is too stimulating, so watching something on TV is better. With TV, you do have to worry about the blue light. That's also one of the reasons the devices interrupt sleep. Is that the blue light in the devices shines into our eyes, tricks our brains into thinking it's still daytime, that we don't produce enough melatonin.
That's crazy.
The sleep hormone that you need.
Yeah.
So what I and my family do when we watch TV at night is we wear orange safety glasses.
Oh, really?
Yes. So you look like a welder in your pajamas.
Right.
But they work. They filter out the blue light, and they're like $20 on Amazon, if not less.
And are people sleep? Do you find your family sleeps pretty well?
It definitely makes a difference for me, and I struggle with sleep. But I'm one of those people where reading stimulates me too much. I get too into the book. I don't want to put it away. But TV, for whatever reason, there'll be the end of the episode or the end of the scene or something, and it's just easier for me to turn it off.
Yeah.
But I just worry about the blue light, and those glasses seem to work. They seem to work.
I ain't going to try those.
Yeah.
You, one of the rules I really liked, and maybe I liked it because we kind of do this around our house, is you create no phone zones, right? That you create in your family life places where you can ban the phone. Like, for example, at dinner, like we don't have our phones out at dinner. I mean, it's not a rule, but I think everybody kind of knows, like, we have family dinners, which I'm always surprised that more people don't do that. Like, that's a very important thing in our household. But why did you come up with that idea? Was that based on some research that you had done?
I'd read about that idea for a while. The story that I tell in the book is when we were on vacation and my oldest daughter was on the phone talking to a friend of hers when we were on the snorkel boat. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? This is one of the last times we're going to be taking a family trip before you go to college. And what are you doing? So it just made me realize that there's just times that you really got to carve out that are phone free. And family dinner is a great one. Right before bed is another. And vacation is right at the top of the list. And, we've had small compromises on this of, okay, you can use it for this amount of time in the car, but then I have to put it away. Or you can look at it in the evening, but that for most of the time, just not being on the phone, because the car is actually a great place to have those family conversations.
Yeah, it's the best.
The last family trip that we took, we did that. We limited phone time during the drive, and we had some of the most amazing conversations. My youngest, who's 13, she would say, "Question for the car," and then she'd talk about like your favorite this, your favorite that, and everybody had to answer. And we got into some really, really interesting discussions, about other trips that we'd taken and favorite memories, and even, some stuff around culture and politics that ended up coming up when we were exchanging opinions and ideas.
Yeah, the car is the best time to connect with your kid. I used to drive my daughter to school. I complained because my daughter goes to school really far away, and I used to complain. And this year she got a bus, And now I'm like realizing I'm not having as many great conversations with her anymore because she comes home from school and she's exhausted, and in the morning those were the times, like those were the best. So I'm just going to start. I already told her I'm going to start picking her up and taking her to school more often. Even forget this bus thing because it's a really great time to bond. Now, I don't want to go through every rule, and we're sort of out of time here, but if parents could follow one of the 10 rules in your book, which one do you think would have like the biggest impact? Like maybe we missed it, maybe we haven't talked about it yet, but if there's one rule that you feel like I wish everybody would come away reading my book and thinking, what would it be?
No devices in the bedroom overnight, which we discussed, just because sleep is so crucial to physical health and mental health. If I had to choose a second one, it would probably be the one about basic phones, that the choice isn't smartphone versus flip phone anymore, that there are alternatives for the way I have it set up. You're 15 and under, or a kid who doesn't have their driver's license or is not at least 16 and making their own way, around their town, that they do not have an internet-enabled phone. They have a phone that is automatically right out of the box, not going to have social media or an internet browser or AI companion chat box.
So in writing this, obviously there's a lot of bad news, right? Like, do you have hope though that we can kind of get through this? I mean, I guess we've gotten through it in the past, when things have thrown themselves at a young generation, but even with AI coming down the road, and who knows what's after AI, what gives you hope that we are going to weather this storm and all the storms coming down the road?
Well, I mean, one thing that definitely gives me hope is that more and more schools are going to no phones during the school day bell to bell.
Yeah.
And I hope that will be every school before long. So we still have progress to make, but there's been a lot of progress on that in the last year or two. And that gives me some hope, because then that'll be a time when kids have to learn how to live and learn without the phone, that there'll fewer distractions in the classroom, that they'll talk to each other at lunch instead of being on their phones. There's just so many compelling reasons to put that into place. And so that gives me hope.
Well, Jean Twenge, thank you. Always super fascinating to talk to you. And I'm so happy you put this book out in the world. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about it. Right About Now is produced and hosted by yours truly, Jonathan Small, with opening music by my son, Elijah Small. And I also want to encourage you to head on over to my Substack, which is called Small Talk. There I do a weekly interview related to Generation X, whether it's music or culture or business or retirement or travel. We talk about the issues that Gen Xers are thinking about and dealing with. And so I'm having a lot of fun on Small Talk. So if you like what you hear on Right About Now, I really encourage you to head on over to Small Talk and, hey, maybe even subscribe. Until next time, this is John Small bidding you all farewell.